Now, Venezuela will go to the polls this Sunday in one of the most controversial elections in the country's history. Some think the small South American nation is on the verge of civil war, with droves of its 30 million strong population taking to the streets for 4 months in protest of widespread food and medicine shortages. They charge their president, Nicolas Maduro, with failing to manage the country's economy effectively. Some say he's turning the country into a dictatorship after imprisoning political opponents and killing over 100 protesters. Well, in a moment, we'll talk to some Venezuelans living in the UK. But first, let's speak with BBC journalist Vladimir Hernandez, who spent time with protesters in Venezuela's capital, Caracas. Take us right back to basics, if you would. Where have the problems come from in Venezuela, and what are those problems?
So there are two main problems. The economy, it's the highest inflation in the world. A lot of people are struggling to get by food, medicines, all sorts of things. In the last year, over 80% of the population said in a poll that they were only eating twice a day. Bear in mind, this is a country with one of the highest oil reserves in the world. And then on the second hand, the government earlier this year tried to disband the National Assembly, or the Congress, which is led by the opposition, and the opposition felt that was the last remaining area of political dissent, and that kicked off just 3 months or more now of protests until today.
And this is a desperate situation. There was a video on the BBC website last week of people chasing after bin lorries, families, and not just a few, many, many people, taking out bags of food waste, dipping their hands in and feeding it to their children. This is just such a desperate situation for so many people, and huge problems with malnourishment as well for children.
Yeah, child malnourishment has gone up 30% in the last year, and ironically, as soon as those figures went out, the Minister for Health was sacked just because of revealing these figures. Yes, many people in many places tell you they've never seen something like this before, and those bin lorry pictures that we have seen here are only in the capital in Caracas, but outside of the rest of the country, the situation is much worse by far.
So what is it that the protesters want?
The protesters want fresh elections. They think the government hasn't fulfilled its responsibilities. They think the elections are due next year, but they think the more the time passes, the worse the economy is going to get, and they need new leadership, and they think the government should listen to their call.
Well, I know that you've been spending some time with the protesters, so let's have a look.
Prayers before the storm. This group carries out this ritual before every anti-government protest in Caracas. After almost 100 deaths and thousands of arrests, no wonder they feel the need to pray. Numerous Venezuelans have taken to the streets to ask President Maduro to call for fresh elections, due to severe food and medicine shortages, but also against his plans to rewrite the constitution. On the front line of every protest, there is a group of young men and women who call themselves the Resistance, and they face the worst of the security forces, the heavy-handed response. Often it's a one-sided battle.
This is what normally ends up happening almost every day. For more than 3 months, protests end up in violent clashes where young men, young students, boys and girls can end up injured and some of them even killed.
Many of the students in the Resistance shy away from the media to avoid exposure, but a group of them has agreed to meet me at this university. I was a student here myself. In my day, we were protesting against rising bus fares. Today, it's a rather more desperate story. We have concealed their identities and changed their voices to protect them.
The way I see it, the resistance is everybody who is against the regime. Many people see it as a dictatorship, and if you look at what they're doing, that's what it is, really. At the moment, they are even trying to change our constitution, which is what all our ancestors fought for.
I think the resistance is those people who come out to protest and who are willing to take the lead to confront the police or the National Guard.
Many of the students I met told me they come from working class areas which have been specially hit hard by the economic collapse. But the Venezuelan government accuses them of staging a coup to topple President Maduro.
Some have labeled us as terrorists, but I think that all of us youth who make up the resistance are brave fighters. We are defending our people from the government's brutal repression.
Venezuela's state attorney, Luisa Ortega Diaz, has said that the government's actions can be called state terrorism. Thousands have been put in jail, some taken to military courts, and others have still been held even after a judge ordered their release. I posed these issues to Freddy Bernal, a Venezuelan high-ranking minister who gave a rare interview to the BBC. He passed the responsibility back to the Attorney General.
There've been more than 100 people killed in street protests, but out of these, almost 20 are National Guardsmen or policemen, killed with homemade rocket launchers. Why has the Attorney General not made any comment about this? I wouldn't hesitate to say that Mrs. Ortega-Diaz is responsible, through dereliction of duty, for the deaths that have occurred on the streets of Caracas.
As the death toll rises, the protests in Caracas are now increasingly followed by vigils like this one to remember the dead. For everyone in this city, the focus now is on Sunday. That's the date for a vote to elect a new assembly tasked with rewriting Venezuela's constitution.
This is a country that has seen many of its youngest people killed, injured or arrested. People like these are commemorating the lives lost in this wave of political unrest. Now this is very much an open wound and the consequences are far from known, regardless of who's going to run this nation.
Vladimir Hernandez, BBC News, Caracas.
Well, let's talk now to two Venezuelans living here in London, Angela Fuguet, who runs a shop selling Venezuelan clothes, and Alejandro Rivera, who works in the media and also in Caracas. We can speak to the local journalist Fabiola Ferrero. Thank you all for speaking to us today. First of all, Alejandro, tell us what conditions are like for your family back home in Venezuela.
Well, it's kind of mixed up. My dad is a comedian, well known over there, and he is been experimenting and dealing with this situation as everyone, but in a different spot. Like he gets more attention from the people, but from the government as well. I mean, he draws more attention. So it's difficult for him try to fight against it and being part of the resistance as well. He tries to deliver the message from the people to the government, against the government, against what the government is doing to the people.
And is the government cracking down on him?
Yes, since some time ago, like long way before this, shutting down venues where he's going to do shows or whatever. And on the other hand, my mother, she's a normal citizen, one more of the people living around, and she's dealing with the rest of the situation that everyone else is dealt.
How about you, Angela? What's it like for your family?
Well, it's been really difficult to communicate with my parents. I haven't spoken to them on the phone for over 3 weeks because there's no internet service. They keep stealing the wires from their telephone cables. So the only way we can communicate is through WhatsApp or just the occasional Facebook message that I get from them. So we rely very heavily on social media to be able to communicate with each other and with the rest of the country. They often don't have electricity. There's, food is scarce, so whatever they find at super inflated prices, and it's quite prohibitive. So
for example, explain to people, if they go into a shop, is it just empty shelves?
Yes, it's to the point where they put shelves together so it appears to be fuller, but the shelves are empty. And if you find products, they have been practically ransacked from the shelves when they allow people to go in and buy them. So there's a restriction on how many products you can buy, if you can find them, and people buy things unnecessarily because if they can find them, they will stockpile them. But then again, it's a case of being able to afford it. Affordability is highly reduced because you're earning $10 a month and you're paying $20 for something, and that's like 1 month of $10 and a product that could cost you between $6 and $10, just to give you an idea. So it's it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, it's everyone's suffering from this. It's not it doesn't just affect a certain part of the population.
Fabiola, I want to bring you in. Give us a sense of what it's like on the streets right now. We're 2 days away from these hugely controversial elections. Is it calm, or are there a lot of protesters still out on the streets?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear about the stories that we just heard from my countrymen. Well, the streets are not calm at all, but it is true that the protests are smaller at the moment. Well, one of the reasons is because people are afraid. There have been over 100 deaths, and the number keeps increasing on a daily basis. But also there has been a change of the protest, and now people are blocking their own streets to try to avoid people from walking the streets and to block the whole city. This works mainly in the east part of the city, but also at nights you can see very violent confrontations between some protesters and the state security forces in some other areas of the cities. So in general, what the feeling is you can see a very high tension in the streets, not only in the political sphere, but also the regular citizen is living a very hostile situation right now.
Alejandro, explain why these elections on Sunday are so controversial.
Well, it's basically like a declaration of a dictatorship. It's not like they didn't ask anyone like, would you like us to do the election or a referendum or consultation? They're just going to do it. They're heading straight to them. Like the candidates are not people prepared with a proper background for the sector they are postulating as candidates, and the government is just doing it regardless what the people thinks or the whole country thinks. And they did a popular consultation. Over 7.5 million people voted and signed against that, and they just don't care. They think they own the country. So that's what, among many other reasons, what has people protesting against the government. It's not like we want something else. This has to stop.
Thank you both for coming in today and speaking to us. Thank you also to Fabiola speaking to us from Venezuela.